So now, before we proceed, let me sum up what we just learned, so that this is all really clear because it is important. In React apps, you work with components, typically with function components in modern React. Those components have one job in the end, and that is this JSX code which they return. This tells React what the output of that component should be. Now, in your React components, you can work with state, or with props, or with context, though props and context, as I mentioned, all come down to state changes in the end, to make changes to a component and to make changes to the data that affects this component or that affects parts of your application. Whenever you change state in a component, that component where the state changed is re-evaluated, and that simply means that the component function is executed again. So all this code runs again, and therefore we get a new output. This might actually be exactly the same output as before, but it could also look different. For example, if suddenly a paragraph is rendered or not, or as in the case of the demo output component, if the text is rendered or not. React simply takes the result of this latest evaluation and compares it to the previous evaluation's result. And it does that for all affected components. And then it hands off any changes, any differences it identified to, in our case, React DOM, because we are using React DOM to render our React app here in the index.js file. And React DOM will take those changes and apply them to the real DOM in the browser. And really only those changes, nothing else. Now, when React re-evaluates a component, it does not just re-evaluate that component, but since it reruns the entire function and therefore also rebuilds this JSX code, rebuilds the output for this latest snapshot, so to say, it will also rerun all components that you have in this JSX code. Like in this case, it will rerun the demo output and the button components. Now, to avoid unnecessary re-executions of child components, you can use React Memo to tell React, hey, please only execute this component function again if the props really changed. So if we got real new values in there. If we got no new values, please don't re-execute this function. Now, since re-evaluating a component means that the entire component function runs again, that can have strange effects if you're not aware of the fact that this really means that everything in this function runs again. And therefore, if you, for example, create functions in the function and you pass those functions through props to other components, you will indeed get a new function object, and even React Memo will then not be able to help you because objects are reference values and comparing them with equal signs, which is what React Memo does under the hood, will not work. For primitive values, you will therefore not have that problem. That's where use callback comes in and can help you, because with use callback you can tell React that it should store a function and not recreate it when the surrounding function runs again, as long as certain dependencies didn't change. That is what we learned thus far. Now, there are a couple of open questions though. For example, if the app function runs again whenever the state changes, doesn't this mean that we all the time reinitialize our state? Because we also execute use state over and over again then. Why is this not causing problems? Well, it's questions like this and general state-related questions that we're going to dive in next.